Welcome to Halifax.
Getting drunk from 7 to 3. Overindulged in flesh like it's free. We're on a fast ride where monkeys killing time with machines. Making love that we don't even feel. You don't even notice if it's her or it's me. But somewhere deep in it's cutting like a knife, so you just kill it with that one. All of a sudden you are free. You call your mom and say, hey, it's me. I just need some more mommy money. I'm gonna spend it. You're filling up my house, my face, my body, and my tongue, 'cause I just wanna feel good. Using all that's left. Somewhere in your chest, on your sweetheart hidden mist. Uh-oh. Shades of gold, 'cause our plastic looks never get old. Getting kicks from coffee on the go. When you get up good. And all you ever understood. Wanna get close, wanna find a little calm. Now the world is turning dark, so you just do what you do. Using all that's left. Using all that's left. Somewhere in your chest. Somewhere in your chest. Using all that's left. Somewhere in your chest. All your sweetheart hidden is. Oh. All that's left. 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 All that's
Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We're here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, 'cause we all gon' say, ugh. Elevate, elevate, elevate. Higher, elevate, elevate, elevate. Higher, we gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Happy Friday, folks. Hope you're doing well. It's great to be back on the show with you yet again. Let's get my laundry out of the way of the picture, shall we? It's great to be back on with you yet again here on essentially the official full day of the convention here in Calgary, Alberta. It's been absolutely fantastic. The first day was great. Not a whole lot going on. Registration opened up around 1 p.m. local time yesterday. And then you had like the first starting of the event around 6:30 last night, which was, you would have seen some of those speeches on CPAC and throughout social media. You heard from the likes of Melissa Lantsman, Aaron Gunn, and several other MPs, just getting people riled up and, I should say riled up, that's not the word I want to use. Wanted to get people going and setting the stinking tone of what is going to happen this weekend, what the expectations are, and where the party is looking to go moving forward. There's many pundits from outside the party who are like, oh, there's a different tone. They're looking at solutions now. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Apparently, since you guys have nothing else to do with your time now, you're realizing, oh, they're proposing solutions at this point in time. But, that's hilarious, neither here nor there at this point. However, at least they're acknowledging it on the air. And this is kind of where we're at this point in time. So last night was more of just kind of like a, hey, opening ceremonies. Let's go. It's going to be a great weekend. We're going to talk policy. We're going to talk this. We're going to talk that. You know, a lot of that, those conversations or those speeches were made last night. So you're asking, Josh, where were the updates? Well, be honest, there wasn't a whole lot of updates. You probably saw it from the other creators as well. Lots of photos, lots of meeting people, lots of saying, hey, how you doing? And not, you know, and that was essentially a lot of what was just a kickoff night, right? So today's the day we're gonna start seeing more stuff. You're gonna start seeing the breakout rooms take place. You're gonna start talking. People are gonna start delegates are gonna start deliberating over policy that the party wants to go after and focus on. And then tonight is the night. You're gonna have Pierre Poilievre's speech tonight. Then you're gonna have the vote directly after, and we'll find out tonight what happens with Pierre Poilievre. Where it's going to be more of a question of how much of the support he's going to get. We think he's going to pass the leadership review. It's going to be more so about, though, how much, what's going to happen. So that's really what we're seeing right now here on the ground. We're looking forward to kind of moving forward. But we know why you clicked. You saw the title. You saw the thumbnail. It's going to be a lot of the conversations that erupted yesterday into today with Donald Trump, Alberta independence, meeting with the Trump officials. All of a sudden, our leaders here in Canada are starting to voice their displeasure of the whole situation, which is new. That's different. And so we'll be discussing that. And we're going to be getting into a couple other kind of niche topics, niche stories that I think you'll find interesting. One of which being that we found out that the Liberal Party of Canada, the governing party, has spent money to essentially hire consultants to teach MPs how to answer questions in committee. That was hilarious. So we'll be discussing that and so much more. There's a lot to get into. And but before we get into it, make sure you like, subscribe, share with your friends. It's a feel good Friday, baby. We're happy to be on here. We have a lot to discuss and get into. And as well, before we get into the meat of the story of today, people were also asking how did things go at the university yesterday, going on campus. You saw that video on the short as well. It was great. Honestly, I didn't know how things were going to go because it's a fairly guerrilla tactic what we're doing. There's nothing official about it. We're just popping up on campus, sign, mic in hand, let's have a conversation. And a lot of people were, especially the topic of like, you know, China is more dangerous to deal with than the United States. People kind of, when it comes to the nuances and discussions around geopolitics, people tend to be like, oh, what does that even mean? You know, people were definitely felt passionate that the United States sucks, Trump sucks. But there's not a whole lot of people who are willing to engage in a conversation because a lot of people admitted we don't really know a whole lot about this. So yesterday was a lot of just kind of discussion, informing what's been going on from our perspective and what we're seeing. And it was a lot of great discussion for the most part. A lot of people were saying, wow, I didn't know that, but what about this? And push back on that, had questions about that, push back on this. And so overall, I thought it was a very positive day. I think we had, you know, I think we averaged close to probably 10 conversations, averaging about 10 minutes apiece. So it was a good solid, you know, over an hour of talking and chatting and getting points across. There was a couple, though, that will make the reel, and it will be fascinating. We had one woman directly from China go off on us, was so offended by our signs, so offended by the premise that China is, I don't know, evil. And it was wild to be a witness to that and to be on the receiving end of that. And at the same time, dish it right back. Hit the points, hit the talks. What's actually happened? China can't be that bad. China's killed Canadian citizens. China's not that bad. Why would they ever do that? I don't know. Because they're not a good regime. They've murdered their own citizens. They disappeared their own people. If they speak about Xi Jinping, what's going on here? So it was she was fuming, and that was the last talk of the day. So we wanted to we started off on a strong tone and we ended on a strong tone. So it was fascinating. Now that we've got enough time, I killed enough time here in the first 5 minutes here. We should have people ready to go. Now let's get into the story of the day, shall we? All right. So, Canada separatists accused of treason after secret talks with the U.S. State Department. Oh my gosh. You know, David Eby, as we know, is the front man of this. And this all took place yesterday. I know that Moose on Loose covered this as well. I have a question about this, and I'm not just going to be reading the headlines today and talking about the news. When I saw the visceral reaction to this meeting taking place, I had a lot of questions about it, and I'm curious if you had the same questions. And we'll kind of get into the meat of the article and the conversations that are being had and the points that are being made. However, I do have a significant question of why? What's going on here? What is currently taking place? So we have apparently covert meetings between separatist activists in the Canadian province of Alberta and members of Donald Trump's administration amount to treason, the Premier of British Columbia said on Thursday. To go to a foreign country and to ask for assistance in breaking up Canada, there's an old-fashioned word for that, and that word is treason, David Eby told reporters. It is completely inappropriate to seek to weaken Canada to go and ask for assistance to break up this country from a foreign power and, with respect, a president who has not been particularly respectful of Canada's sovereignty. The revelations that far-right activists met with U.S. State Department officials first emerged in a Financial Times report outlining the efforts of a group increasingly emboldened separatists are taking in their attempt to secede from Canada. A minority of residents of the oil-rich province have long argued that the province's woes are due to the structure of payments to the federal government and are a perceived inability to get their vast fossil fuels reserves to market. Organizers of the Alberta Independence Movement, which still boasts only minority support, are now collecting signatures to trigger a referendum vote. The pro-independence campaign has been traveling across the province as organizers try to collect nearly 178,000 signatures over the next few months. The group has publicly said it wants a $500 billion credit facility from the U.S. Treasury to help fund the creation of a new country if the referendum is successful. So, a couple things that kind of stuck out to me when I first saw this was people, obviously EB's not happy with the fact that these separatists or the independence movement is going and meeting with officials in the United States, especially of a country that is, made barbs about us being the 51st state. And so obviously people are not too happy about that situation. And then additionally, we have the issue of a $500 billion credit, the $500 billion credit that this the group is allegedly looking if they do break apart from Canada. And people are just like, well, like, why you're selling out to the United States, and definitely can be perceived that way. It's I believe I want to make sure I got the wording there correctly. Credit facility. So I'm curious if that would be likely. That would be paid back over time, but it would be essentially kind of a kickstart them to get them going. And people and the first reaction is that's crazy. And, it is. That's a wild ask. It's a big ask. And people saying, well, the United States essentially is just looking to purchase Alberta. That's how that's viewed. And I understand that perspective. I do wonder, my other side of it is, United States has been so huge in foreign conflicts over the years that they want to spread democracy everywhere. And because Alberta is looking for the American brand of freedom than what Canada's been providing recently, I'm curious if this could be seen as an investment in spreading democracy across the globe. Is this a part of that foreign policy perspective of the United States that would serve them? I'm curious. I don't know. However, I'm not going to get into too much of that. My question lies with this: is why this and why now? You know me. I love asking that question when stories like this pop off. Why this? Why now? The reason I ask that is because this isn't new. Jeffrey Rath and that crew have gone to the United States back in March of last year. If you remember this story of the Western Standard, Alberta lawyer leading delegation to Washington in hopes of joining the U.S. They've had meetings. Jeffrey Rath has been public about having meetings with delegates and people from the administration in the United States. It started at the lower levels and has reached its way up. But I'm wondering, why this? Why now? Why is this becoming the issue now? This story broke, if you catch it here, was written March 4th of 2025. But now it's an issue. Now it's a problem that they're meeting with officials in Washington. Now it's a problem. And that's why I love this article. I think it started off here in that byline. Alberta activists covert meetings with U.S. officials. Secret. Jeffrey Rath, whether you like him or not, he's been very public of them going to Washington. Very public about his meetings with officials and how it's going and where things are going. I think he actually came on our show and talked about that specifically. And that's why I was really thrown off when I saw the media blast go off about this. I was really thrown off when the bomb went off and all of a sudden guys like EB are coming out saying, you guys are treasonous. You guys are the worst of the worst. We need to deal with this. We need to deal with this. And I'm wondering, why this? Why now? I've been told that this is not to be taken seriously. I've read that it's a fringe minority. It's just a bunch of radicals. This is not going to go anywhere. Alberta just needs to suck it up and stay in Canada. Canada's better than anything else that'll ever happen. It's a bad idea. You know, everything. I've heard everything. To discredit the movement, to discredit what they're doing, to essentially tell people not to take them seriously. Like I've read it all at this point in time. But now we have a problem with it. Now it's treasonous. Now it's irresponsible. Okay. We read EB's comments. Let's now actually listen to EB's comments.
I'd like to just take and pause a moment. I read an article last night in the Financial Times about a group of people from Alberta, I won't describe them as Albertans, who went to the White House seeking the assistance of the United States to break up our country. Now, I understand the desire to hold a referendum, to talk about the issues you want to talk about in Canada. We got free speech, that's important. But to go to a foreign country and to ask for assistance in breaking up Canada, there's an old-fashioned word for that, and that word is treason. It is completely inappropriate to seek to weaken Canada, to seek to go and ask for assistance to break up this country from a foreign power. And with respect, a president who has not been particularly respectful of Canada's sovereignty. I'm going to be raising that issue at this table. I think that while we can respect the right of any Canadian to express themselves, to vote in a referendum, I think we need to draw the line at people seeking the assistance of foreign countries to break up this beautiful land of ours that our forefathers, our foremothers, our parents, our grandparents fought for. You know, there is a line. And especially at this time when all Canadians have to pull together, I think we can speak as one voice about conduct like that.
We need to pull together, says the guy who will not work with Alberta on trying to get this pipeline built. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's all about Team Canada until it starts talking about trying to get our resources to market, huh? We've even seen comments like this from Polling Canada. It says, we have got to do something about these separatists. That's a little ominous, isn't it? Again, even pages like Polling Canada have dismissed the idea over time. But now it's an issue. Now we're having problems. Why this? Why now? Carney says he expects the U.S. to respect Canadian sovereignty after Alberta separatists meet with the Trump team. This was all during the Premier's meeting, and this is what Carney's statement was about that. He just wants the U.S. to respect Canadian sovereignty. And going back to EB's comments here, Marco Hoytes, who's been an expert on the issue of what's been happening with the triad groups, Mexican cartels, shipping fentanyl, working with these groups over from China, the United Front Work Department, and so on and so forth. He said this: if David Eby wants to play the treason game, he's on a very thin ice, for I will throw the Panda Bond card, and he'll be brought up on treason along with Christy Clark. Where's the Panda Bond money, Dave? It's a good question. It's a good question. Dave has worked very, he's been very sympathetic to the Chinese cause. So now, but when we're dealing with the U.S., this is treasonous. But when he's doing weird stuff and we have questions about his activities with the likes of China, but we won't talk about that, though. We won't talk about that and how he's not been defending British Columbian interests when it comes to the issues of China. But hey, we're going to call Alberta independent separatists treasonous, which is funny coming from the likes of David Eby. So as I said, why this, why now? Well, it seems to be coming off the heels of this big rally that took place here in Calgary just this past week. It was a big rally. They packed everybody in there. It was filled to the brim. This was just the beginning of it. Obviously, people were just still filing in. But could this be it? Could this be the reason? People are now starting to see on the news the numbers that this movement is gathering. They realize there's a groundswell of support here in Alberta. And that's a concern. But at the same time, I've been told Alberta's a nothing province. They're just a bunch of hillbilly rednecks that need to stop crying all the time and stop whining. Why do Easterners all of a sudden care that Alberta is getting some serious movement on independence? I've been told that oil is icky, oil is bad. Mr. Blanchette saying the dirty oil money. Meanwhile, Quebec ships in oil from Saudi Arabia. But dirty oil money from Alberta, that's how they've characterized it. This is unbelievable at this point in time, right, folks? And what's the issue is, well, they're starting to see that this movement is moving. And things are not going according to plan. They're not liking how this is all going at this present time. And they are unimpressed. They are nervous because as much as they've said, oil stays in the ground, don't worry about it. Now that oil-rich province wants to secede from Confederation, I imagine that if they were so useless, didn't matter what they did or did not do, I'd imagine you'd want them to leave. You didn't care if they left or came. Like, for people you don't care about, sorry to admit, if they leave, you don't notice them. If they come, you don't notice them. But Alberta now getting closer and seems like is getting more support by the day on this independence issue. All of a sudden is getting all of the coverage from the news, all of the coverage from premiers talking about this. And Danielle Smith was asked about this in the premier's meeting, and this was her statement on it.
I've always been clear that me and our United Conservative Caucus are supportive of a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. That is one of the bills that we passed when I first came in. But I think we also have to be realistic that 10 years under Justin Trudeau's government, our province was relentlessly attacked. Our economy was relentlessly attacked, not only for our economy, but our provincial rights and also our personal freedoms and our way of life. And so when you look at the polls, they suggest as many as 30% of Albertans have lost hope. That's about 1 million people. And I'm not going to demonize or marginalize a million of my fellow citizens when they've got legitimate grievances. What we need to do is we need to give Albertans hope. We need to show them, not just tell them, not just words, but with actions that Canada can work. And that's what I've been doing. That's why I signed an agreement with the Prime Minister in November so that we could work in common cause on correcting some of the mistakes, I would say, of the Trudeau government. And it's why we participate in these kinds of First Ministers' conferences so that we can find the things that we agree on and work together for that, for the betterment of the country. And I think this is a very powerful table that has been able to do that for the last 3 years that I've been on it. And I'm honored and delighted to be here.
Calling it what it is. They have legitimate grievances. Albertans have felt tossed aside for a very long time. And we would do well to listen to them. However, Canada has not been listening to them. Canada said, no, screw you, shut up. We've seen the Trudeau administration, the Trudeau government attacking Alberta constantly, demonizing them and hollowing out their jobs, hollowing out their industry, saying the future is electric. Okay. And saying we're going to keep the oil down where it needs to be. And of course, the likes of globalist Mark Carney comes along and realizes that we're starting to see a shift in the mentality and the messaging around conventional energy now that a lot of these big name corporations are investing in AI, and AI requires conventional energy to operate and work. So now all of a sudden, energy's good, and energy's not so dirty anymore. And so when Danielle Smith comes up and says this, she's been trying to play that thin line. Yeah, the likes of Jeffrey Rath in, you know, the big rally that took place this week in Calgary, calling Danielle Smith echoing globalist talking points. I was like, oh my goodness, that's wild. That's a wild take. I think Danielle Smith's the only person in this country who's trying to thread the needle. Wants Alberta to stay part of Canada. Wants to see Canada address the grievances of Alberta, trying to be that middleman for them. And Danielle Smith's getting demonized on all sides. The independence movement says, you're not doing enough. This is a waste of time. Stop talking to us. Then you have the Liberals who are saying that she's leading the independence movement and greenlighting it. And just shows me that none of these people who sit down and listen to her and see what she's been trying to do with the bills that she's introduced, that she's the only one who's trying to be a unifier on this. The only one. But she is constantly demonized by all sides. And man, I feel for her because she's dealing with it everywhere. And she's dealing with it with poise. Even the First Nations who are calling out Danielle Smith, echoing this rhetoric that she's leading the independence movement in Alberta. That's what it was said.
CP government do the right thing and resign.
All right, sorry folks, the volume's really low on this. I'm jacked it up on all sides that I possibly can. Let's see, yeah, it's as high as it goes. Try to listen carefully.
Immediately. Because from here on in forward, the road is going to get rocky and rough.
Danielle Smith has conspired with the separatists through Bill 14. The Premier changed the law after the court told her it was a breach of our treaties to proceed this way.
So Premier Smith and the UCP cabinet, I hope you have your bags packed, because when this referendum is defeated, I will gladly walk you to the border. Danielle Smith.
So it's this type of rhetoric I find really funny, that they believe the UCP is the one leading this charge. The UCP is the reason why Alberta wants to secede from Confederation. And I'm like, where have you been? What are you watching? Because that's not what I'm seeing. That's not what I've been hearing. That's not what I've been reading over the past however many years at this point in time. Danielle Smith's been working hard. You heard her at the UCP convention, where she said, I do believe after this MOU signed with Mark Carney and the Liberals, that Albertans believe that Canada can still work. And after she said that, she was drowned out in booze. So how can you tell me that this woman's leading the charge of the independence movement when she's actively trying to shoehorn and get Canada on board and get Carney on board with all these different projects, with kicking and screaming at this point, because we know that MOU is trash, and she's getting booed by constituents of her perspective on this? And you're going to say that, no, we're going to walk you to the border when this referendum's defeated so you can go over to the United States. Like, this is such dangerous rhetoric. And Ezra Levant brought up this individual, this chief in particular right here you see on screen. He brought up an old article that Ezra Levant wrote for The Sun back in 2014, which, you know, again, this was 12 years ago at this point. However, just intel to kind of keep in mind as we hear more of this. First Nations chief received $55,000 from Tides Foundation, which is an American activist group who, again, is one of those groups who have been trying to fund coastal First Nations here in Canada to fight against any type of oil projects. So that's one of those groups. First Nations chief received about $55,000 from the Tides Foundation. A left-wing lobby group in San Francisco wired $55,000 to the bank account of an Indian chief in northern Alberta, paying him to oppose the oil sands. That's the assumption that's made from that transaction. And sure enough, that chief, Alan Adam from the Athabasca Chippewayan First Nation, earned his money. Last weekend, he flew to Toronto to sit on a stage next to Neil Young, the folk singer, who was in town to demonize Canada's oil industry. Now, $55,000 might sound like a lot of money to pay just to rent a politician for a day, if all the chief did for his money was to appear on stage in Toronto beside Neil Young. But to the Tides Foundation, it's well worth it. Think of Adam as an actor hired to play a role in an elaborate theatrical production. Neil Young had his role. He's the American celebrity who can draw crowds of fawning baby boomer journalists, but at the end of the day, he's just another millionaire celebrity. When he talks about the oil sands, he quickly reveals himself as a low information, know nothing. Adam brings what Young can't, authenticity. Young likes to wear an Indian-style leather vest, but Adam really is an Indian, and he really lives near the oil sands. And so this kind of goes into the perspective on all this whole scenario. But these are things to kind of keep in mind, how the Tides Foundation and other activist groups in America have been funding causes in Canada to combat oil sands, combat the energy sector. And this is just another example. And so it is frustrating when you hear kind of false rhetoric like this coming out saying, well, Danielle Smith's a part of all of it. And you're just like, okay, sorry. Don't agree. Don't see it that way. And that shows to me that either you got an agenda or you're not well versed on what is currently going on. So that's kind of where the frustration is with that. And as I said, as liberals have had more power, been in power a long time, the separation sentiment is growing in Alberta. It's growing again in Quebec. Mark Carney is presiding over the destruction of a country. That's what we're watching in real time at this point. And there's so much he could do to try and unify, but doesn't seem too interested. He's more interested in the red tape that he can continue to throw on the populace. And so as we move forward into federal politics and to more of what's going to happen this weekend in the Conservative Convention, this was a fascinating article to read. Feds spend $263,000 on consultants for coaching on how to answer questions at parliamentary committees. Not a typo. $262,609 for strategic and practical advice on committee appearances. It's getting so bad at this point, they don't know what to do and how to, trying to figure out ways to obfuscate the truth more and not tell the full truth, not tell what's going on, and just answer the questions. Now, no, they spent money on consultants of how to answer questions now. If this is not a smoking gun on how they do not care about the truth, they do not care about the population, they do not care about the people that they govern. They don't care. It's all about power. That when you're now hiring consultants to figure out how to twist the truth, obfuscate the truth, not give everything, well, turns out that money didn't really work well on Lena Diab. Lena Diab's still struggling. And how she still has a job is still beyond me. But hey, man, keep her in there, man. It's fun to see her and Michelle Rempel-Garner go head-to-head, and Michelle just tear her limb from limb. Michelle even said this: if it lets me do it. No, we get Don Lemon face. Let's see if we can pull it up here. Just give me 2 seconds. Because Michelle's comment here I thought was fairly important. Let's pull her up here. Meanwhile, Michelle Rempel-Garner is doing a great job with the live streaming at the conference here so far. Oh, man. Yeah, here it is. Boom. She said this: I'm not sure whether to be flattered, be despondent over the state of the bureaucracy, or ask for the $263,000 side hustle contract to prep the DMs and ADMs and assorted DGs at Sitcom Canada to be questioned by me. It is fascinating. I'm not gonna lie. If I'm Michelle, I'm feeling like I'm a boss. You guys have to bring in a bunch of experts to answer my questions? No, man, that's electric. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great at this point in time. This is awesome. I'm awesome. I'd be super pumped right now. And it just shows you just how the Conservative Party has a lot of good stars in it. Has a lot of good people who are just like, boom, boom, who are sharp, smart, asking the right questions, putting pressure in the right areas, to the point now they're hiring more levels of bureaucracy to fight against that in committee. Hilarious. I'm going to go over some super chats right now, see where things are at on this beautiful Feel Good Friday, folks. Julie Mantois 6087 says, good morning. And good morning. Thank you so much. Good to see you. The Carvaca podcast, my guy, saying, I find it curious that Quebec can have an active separatist political outfit, but Alberta cannot. How does this work out logically? And how does Eby allow Palestinian separatists in his cabinet? Oh, God love you. Oh man, I love that question. That's a fantastic question. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? Kushal. That's what I want to know. We have all those issues. We have all those questions of this whole thing. Is, that's how Eastern Canada operates with different rules, because Quebec has far more seats and can sway elections far more easily. So they're allowed to do whatever they want. Alberta is just kind of seen as that, ugly stepchild out there in the West that kind of just, should be left alone, and we don't need to listen to it, and they can just suffer in the dark. So there's that tension there. But the Calistani separatists, the issue with China, all of this are great questions for David Eby. But these are stories that will always be suppressed until it hits the light of day and it's politically convenient to address, as we've seen with the Alberta separatist movement, where they've been ignored, demonized for a long time. They've been going to Washington for up close to a year at this point. They've been going down there. Now we're talking about it, though. Odd. But yeah, great question, Kushal. I love that question. JP, Alberta First says, Quebec votes to separate. Canada says, please stay, we love you. Alberta petitioning for a referendum, and the rest of Canada says, shut up, traitors. Sit down and just pay up. Yeah, that's how this goes. That's how it feels. 100%. AJP 231 says, it's like they forget we have a federal party that has voting power that want to separate. It's like they forget we have a federal party that has voting power that want to separate. I think, are you talking about the Bloc Québécois, I'm guessing you're referring to on that one? Because that is funny. And yeah, 100%. Soon Stole Silver says, you know what will shut down the Alberta independence movement? Remove equalization pay and give more seats to the West. But that is politically unaliving, especially for the Conservative. Yeah, that would be, if they ever made any adjustments to, giving more seats to Alberta and, figuring out what's happening there in terms of, because I know it comes down to consensus and population and how that all works out. And I know they already did a redrawing of boundaries recently. But then as well, reviewing equalization pay, that would be fascinating. It would get people going. It would. However, that would ruin anybody's political career in a heartbeat. Lucky Dice 78 says, Canadians think Alberta are ignorant, stupid, and whiny. They want our money and our oil, but don't want us to have our money and our oil. Now ask yourself, would you want to stick around? Good question. It's a great question. That sums up very well the abuse that Alberta has taken for far too long from the East. Is we like what you bring to the table, but you just gonna sit down and shut up. And anytime you bring up an issue, anytime you have a concern, we don't really care. We'll placate to a degree, but we don't care. And then if you have someone like Trudeau comes in and says, no, we really don't care. You guys are a waste of space. I remember when early on in Trudeau's time as prime minister, he went to visit UFC, University of Calgary, which I thought for the time, I was like, whoa, bold. But I really thought Calgary was going to give him, just give him a shot. I know you didn't like his father. You don't like his politics. However, maybe something could be different. And this was like just a few months into him being prime minister. And man, he was met with all the heckling, all the vitriol, all the hatred. And I was like, whoa. That was, even for me, as someone who used to live out here, I was stunned by that visceral reaction right away. And those people were proven right for their vitriol towards what Justin Trudeau ended up doing. And it just shows that they've seen this play out before. They know the game. If you don't know the history, that's confusing. But when you know the history, you know what's going to happen. You know what is coming. This is where it goes. So that's a very, very fair point. John Gotti, T7N, says, once CUSMA is renegotiated, Carney's finished. I don't know about that. It depends. It depends on what happens with CUSMA. If it ends up being like the worst deal ever, that will not help. That would really hurt Carney. However, if it's like even half decent, even just a half decent deal, it could be a net loss compared to the current one. But even if it's a net, it could be a net loss. But if he's even seen as half decent, it will actually, I think, would do well for him and allow him to keep more power. Unfortunately, I think that's where that goes. Nylock says, EB talks about treason while he simps for China. Yeah, talk about it, brother. Talk about it. It is fascinating to me where you get so mad at the independence movement now, but these people get mad at all the wrong people. You're not mad at what China's doing to BC right now. You're not mad at the homelessness in your province. You're not mad at the people going to food banks. You're not mad at people suffering under your leadership as a premier. You're not mad about that. No, you're mad about Alberta. Okay. All right. The Bowlander 76 just dropped $10 on the show. Thank you so much, man. And I wish I had my soundboard with me. I don't have it, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We have Rigged Outcome. Says the Crown owns 81% of the mineral rights in Alberta. You think King Charles will be giving that up? It's a good question. It's a good question. It's one I actually, if I'm being quite honest, I haven't even pondered, and I want to think about that more, of what that means, what the logistics are, what is the reality of that, and how accurate is all that. I actually want to look into that. That's a great point you bring up. Bueno Kitty 3497 says EB brings up a fringe group. EB brings up a fringe group about treason. What he says about the Fed write-up integrating RCMP and legacy media with CCP and no guardrails. No hashtag China. Yeah, man. Everyone's hitting it. It's so obvious. Like, he's so enveloped with Chinese interests, but has the audacity to talk about this situation. It's fascinating. Bill Fisher, 1600, says, as an Albertan, it feels like Canada has left us a long ago. A referendum is the natural end result of that feeling of abandonment. I don't blame you. Yep. 100% see that as the issue, and I can totally see that as a problem. And it's a natural result. If you're being ignored, abused, ridiculed, made fun of constantly, whether it be through politicians, the news, how elections go, how people cover Alberta, all this, at some point you say, okay, you clearly don't like us. We don't like that you don't listen to us. So where's this going to go? Where is this all going to end up going? So we will move on to a couple last little items here, which I thought were fascinating. So Jamil Giovanni doing his Restore the North tour, and he had a very interesting interaction with a communist on his campus, and I thought this was just fascinating to kind of watch this take place.
We must turn to the revolutionary Communist Party to destroy these parasites once and for all.
I will dedicate every waking minute of my political career to making sure communism is not normalized in this country.
How would a conservative government address the issues of working Canadians as opposed to, say, the NDP or the Liberals?
Before we respond to that, if you will, could you give me your answer to what is restoring the promise of Canada mean to you?
Of course. Housing is getting worse. Grocery stores are getting more expensive. Crime is rampant. Gun rights are absolutely worth defending. And identity politics is very divisive. But the issue isn't just with the Liberals. It's with the rampant exploitation of the working class by capitalism. The Liberals and the NDP are just different shades of capitalism, hell-bent on making your life worse and taking away your rights. Even if they say otherwise, politicians will always be on the side of the ruling class instead of the working class. As long as capitalism is allowed to exist, none of these problems is going to be solved. To truly work to solve our problems, we must turn to the revolutionary Communist Party to destroy these parasites once and for all.
Don't go in. I asked the question and he answered. That's what he's supposed to do, right? All right, well, thank you for the answer. I think a genuine critique of, let's say, the ruling class, as you put it, would be one that acknowledges the problem of monopoly and oligopoly, right? Where when one or a small number of businesses have far too much power in an industry, and it becomes elite capture instead of being driven by the choices of consumers or free citizens. The mistake that the NDP makes, in my opinion, even though sometimes I think they diagnose problems in our society well, is that they don't apply the same concern over monopoly and oligopoly to the state. And I think a consistent application of the concentration of power and the centralization of power would mean that whether it's in the private sector or in the government, it would be equally concerning. to be a communist, as I can assume you might be, is, I think, one of the more extreme forms of bootlicking centralized power. That's my opinion. And no, you're not going to interrupt. I do appreciate you being here and sharing your perspective. But if you look at bureaucrats in power, whether they're in large corporations or in government, and your conclusion is they need more power in their hands, not less, I fundamentally think that's not in the interest of the working class. I don't think centralized bureaucracies, whether they're for-profit or not, represent people who need a hand up in society very well. So that's why I think the NDP is wrong, why I think communism is wrong, and I will dedicate every waking minute of my political career to making sure communism is not normalized in this country.
Oh, there you go. Jamil Giovanni laying the smack down on a student who is espousing communist ideals. Funny one. And the thing is, and I saw actually a couple of pundits and people who cover politics retweet this post saying, why is Jamil Giovanni even wasting his time posting this stuff? Communism's like 0.05% of the population. People don't really care. I'll say this. First off, like full-blown communism, like people supporting it, is actually increasing more than we even realize. Halifax is one. There's a communist group in Halifax, Nova Scotia, that has active meetings. They have a coffee shop they take over once a month to talk over communism. I would love to go there. I would love to listen in and hear them out. However, they've attacked me relentlessly online, and they don't like me very much, and they've said they don't like me very much. They know what I look like. However, I want to send somebody who is just a representative of the show, but they don't know it's coming from me, because I would love to kind of get all the intel of what they talk about in these meetings. But there's an active communist group in Halifax that has been growing in terms of their numbers recently. So they're, sure, it's still a small percentage of the population. Again, full-blown communism. However, we are seeing a lot of people who are leaning into more ideals that are on the periphery of communism and really aggressive socialism, where you are starting to strip people of their rights and you're centralizing power and you're centralizing a lot of these issues to a few set of hands. That is starting to look like communism, just with a different title. That has been growing in Canada for quite some time, and that's been concerning. Look at all the monopolies and oligopolies we have in so many industries here in this country. And, Canada's very protective of their industries here. And I get why, because we want to protect our homegrown companies. However, we've protected them so much that they've gotten incredible amount of power. We have not a whole lot of we have next to no competition in some of these industries. And we wonder how we got here. And the NDP, as he said, that's how kind of this whole thing got kicked off, was NDP do a good job of acknowledging the issues that are currently happening. However, they prescribe the wrong solutions. And they say, well, all the private industries, all these big businesses have too much power. We need to give all that power to the state. What? They're not even looking at breaking up the power. They just want to transfer the power from this group to this group, because apparently the government is intrinsically positive, is intrinsically good. That's what we need to do, and that's wrong. No, we need a free market that, again, as Giovanni said here, that gives consumers a choice, that essentially kind of breaks apart a lot of these powers. And I understand over time, the way our system works, it kind of ends up fast tracking to somebody ends up owning everything. And that's where, I don't believe in laissez-faire capitalism. I do believe that there's points that government intervention has to happen where you have to break up companies and kind of reset things. But I also don't agree. I do have an issue with the fact that Canadian legislation has fast-tracked that problem, has fast-tracked that issue, is we haven't really had a true free market because we've blocked out so much competition. And, we only know the likes of Bell, Rogers, is one prime example. Or you have, Sobeys, not President's Choice, but the conglomerate, Loblaws, that own most of the grocery chains. I I didn't realize how much that they've acquired in terms of the grocery stores across the country. You know, I went to Toronto because I live out in Halifax, and you have two options in grocery stores pretty much. It's Superstore or Sobeys. That's it. So when I went to visit Ontario again, which has a more of a diverse set of grocery stores, I didn't realize how many of those, you know, those one-off stores, or sorry, those smaller franchises, smaller chains got bought up by Loblaws, got bought up by Sobeys. Even coming out here to Alberta, and you know, Safeway is a store I grew up on, and then I totally forgot that Sobeys sold off their Empire Holdings, which was the movie theater that they had, movie theater chain they had in Nova Scotia. They sold that off years ago to go and purchase all the Safeways. And so walking into Safeway was just like walking into Sobeys. And I was like, oh man, this is so annoying. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, these groups have bought up so much, and they centralize so much power and authority. And we have these individuals and politicians who say, well, you just need to transfer their power over to the state, instead of actually diversifying our markets and diversifying who can come in and compete. And I remember when the Harper government was like this close to getting Verizon to come in, and Verizon just, you know, it was getting too stupid, and Verizon just pulled the plug. So it's stuff like that where we just need more competition. That would be very, very helpful in kind of easing a lot of the tensions that people have around, you know, the food, their cell phone bills, what have you, all of it, right? And that's really what a lot of this comes down to. So these are some great questions people are having moving forward on. We have a couple more super chats where I'm sure people are definitely spiced up on that topic in general. Let's see if I'm missing any. John Gotti, T7N, says, I think Canada will have to make major concessions. Expanding U.S. dairy access hurts Quebec. Putting U.S. alcohol back on shelves hurts Ontario. And buying the F-35s, we don't really hold the cards. Yeah, that's the problem where a lot of people are having, especially when Trump was really voiced his frustration with us dealing with China, and the exact hit back that you heard from the left, or people who are on the side of Canada working with China, is saying, well, Trump works with China. Trump's doing this, that, the other. And they don't look at the deals that Trump is doing. They're not looking at the concessions and conversations that he's had with China. Canada's gone to China out of weakness. As you said, we don't have cards to really play. We just have to give up everything for a little something back. And it's the same spot that we're in with negotiating with the United States. However, when Trump negotiates with China, he's negotiating from a place of strength because they have a stronger economy. They have a stronger country when it comes to these issues. So they can extract leverage on China and get more out of it. And so one example is, let's talk about EVs. Let's talk about cars coming over from China. It's very open. Trump wants to see cars and car companies over from China, coming from China to the United States. He wants to see that happen. He just doesn't want to see them built in China and shipped over and completely just flood the market. He wants them to come to the United States, set up factories, build factories, and have the cars built in the United States and can be sold here. Like, these are the concessions he's trying to make, which is drastically different than what Carney did. Carney said 49,000 EVs. Don't worry, there's a cap. There's a cap. So we're actually protecting our industry because it's only 3% of the total amount of cars in our country. However, you know, the 49,000 Chinese EVs makes up close to 33, 34, 35% of the EV market in Canada. So we don't talk about that, though. Yeah, no, we won't talk about that. So you have that issue. And he said, we're just going to ship them in and sell them here. We're not going to force them, require them to build warehouses, build factories, build the cars here, and sell them here. We're not going to require them to do that. We're just going to let them ship it in from China. Two very different approaches. And that's the issue. And that is the issue. That's primarily the tension right now between Trump, Canada, and China. Is he just doesn't want these Chinese-made EVs just coming into Canada. If the conversation the deal was, hey, China's going to build these factories, they're going to have strict oversight from Canada, they're going to see what's being put into them, making sure they're not connected in any way to the CCP, Trump wouldn't have said nothing about it. Don't think he would have. So very different. We move on to the next super chat here. Nylock says, communism is fueled by narcissistic greed. They feel they deserve everything for nothing. Most big businesses fit this and why crony capitalism exists. Yes, and the left doesn't. The left hates when you bring up crony capitalism. But it's just, that's it. When you have politicians getting in bed with private business and just essentially fixing the market, it's just a different version of communism. That's why the left hates it so much. That's why young people hate our current system so much. And they just think, oh, communism's the way. It's like, you're just witnessing a variation of communism, a variation of it. It's just focused in the private sector because politicians have been essentially fixing the market to favor these businesses. So, yeah. Carol Elizabeth 9293 says, the West never had a say in anything. No equal say in elections. If we did, liberals would never be in power. Yeah, that's fair. It is. That was like one of the frustrations a lot of people feel, and I understand why, where when we have elections are done by the time it hits Manitoba. Like that's pretty messed up. Like that's pretty messed up in our system. The fact that our elections get called by the time it gets halfway through the country. It tells you everything where the power resides here. Yeah. So there's a lot. And then Carol Elizabeth as well saying, I am born in Nova Scotia, live in Alberta. Alberta is home though. Big thanks for respecting Alberta and understanding where we're coming from. 100%, Carol. I'll be honest, I'm definitely the perspective that I would like to see Canada stay Canada. I want to stay unified. I'm a proud Canadian. However, I understand the grievances. I understand where everyone's coming from. And I would like to see someone become a big boy and in terms of federal politics and be able to deal with this as adults and make some significant changes that can keep Alberta in the fold, keep Quebec in the fold, and keep this country unified. I think that would be incredibly critical, but I understand where we've been we've been led by children, essentially. We've been led by children, and now we've got big dog in charge, Mr. Mark Carney, who's almost more frustrating only because he says a lot of things, but there's things just don't get done. And that's even more frustrating because people feel like he's treating them like they're stupid. And that never helps anybody. So that is the show. That is the Feel Good Friday show, folks. I'm so looking forward to getting back to my studio because I just feel the energy is even different on this. But happy to be doing these. I will be updating now that we're starting to see more things happening here at the convention here. I will be updating. Watch my stories on Instagram and Facebook. I was trying to figure out what the strategy is going to be and how I was going to update you guys. I didn't want to do an X because it's just a cesspool at this point. I've been seeing some of my fellow creators been doing updates on X, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with that, if I'm being quite frank. But however, I will post stories on Instagram and Facebook of updates, things that are happening on the floor, and you can see that today. You'll start seeing things kind of as we get into the afternoon Alberta time. You'll start seeing a lot of updates come in through our pages there on Facebook and Instagram. So that's what we'll be doing. We've been meeting a lot of people. It's been fun times. Shook a lot of hands. Met a lot of folks. Met a lot of you amazing folks. And just a lot of people saying, oh, we're fans of the show. Love what you guys are doing. Love you and Jasmine and everybody else. It's great. And to that, I say thank you. We enjoy it so very much. I enjoy it a lot. And it's truly, truly humbling to talk to y'all and to have these conversations. And I think they're really important. So this has been awesome. I will see you guys on Monday. Rhonda saying thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Please watch for Josh's updates. Yes, Rhonda coming in clutch. You guys are fantastic. And today's the day, man. The vote's today. The vote is today. And it's going to be fascinating. Alex says, see you tomorrow. Me and the boys will be there early to make sure we get in. Let's go. Looking forward to seeing you. It'll be fantastic. And I know Jasmine Lane is doing a little 5-minute speech tomorrow. So that will be fascinating. So tune in for that on CPAC, which I'm sure it'll be. And I'm sure the likes of CBC will have a lot to say about Jasmine showing her face to do that. So that will be fascinating. Anyways, we will end it right there. You guys are awesome. It's been an awesome hour of power. But as for me, have yourselves a good one.